Okay, so today we're going to talk about the intro, our first type of conic section. Okay, there's four types of conic sections. There's circles, there's ellipses, there's parabolas, and there's hyperbolas. We're not going to do hyperbolas this year. We've done a lot with parabolas. So these last two lessons, we're going to focus on circles and ellipses. Okay, what a conic section is that if you imagine a cone, ice cream cone, whatever type of traffic cone, any type of cone, and you were to slice it with a sheet of paper, okay, there's four shapes that could be formed. If you slice the cone horizontally, you end up with the circle. Okay. If you slice it at an angle, you end up with the ellipse. Okay. If you slice the end of it, okay, so like at the bottom of the cone, you would end up with a parabola. And if you slice it kind of parallel or straight up and down, you'd end up with two parabolas. And those are called hyperbolas. Oops. Okay. So like I said, we're going to focus today on circles, tomorrow on ellipses. We've done parabolas, and we're not going to have time for hyperbolas. So if you make it to pre-calc, that's where you'll do it. Circles have a standard form. The standard form for a circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Okay, so this is a kind of a different standard form where you have your x's and y's on the same side. X's and y's, again, x's are inputs, y's are outputs. But there are three variables here that we are not as familiar with. So you have to find those. So your circle, there's two parts of a circle. You have the center of a circle and you have the radius of a circle. So the center being the midpoint of that circle, and then the radius is the distance from the center of the circle to the outer edge of the circle. Okay. So these h, k, and r are going to represent the center and the radius. The first one's obvious. R is going to be the radius. Okay. Now notice that in the formula, it's r squared. So if you need to find r, and you have r squared, you'd have to take the square root of it. So r is the radius. Okay, what about h and k? H is the number that goes with the x. Now notice that the negative sign is already built into that equation. So h is the x value of the center. And you could probably guess that k is going to be the y value of the center. So altogether, hk is the center of your circle. All right, so I shouldn't say vertex, standard form with a center at the origin is x squared plus y squared equals r squared. Now again, really, why does it have a different formula? It really doesn't have a different formula, but if your center is at the origin, that means your center is 0, 0, which means your h value would be 0 and your k value would be 0. So really, it's the same formula, just simplified, because you'd have x minus 0, which of course is just x squared, plus y minus 0, which of course is just y squared, equals your radius squared. Okay. All right, so that's always going to be the same. H is the x value, k is the y value of the center, r is the radius. Okay, so let's do a couple examples. Write the equation of a circle with a center of 0, 6 and a radius of 2. Okay, well, you're going to have to identify what h, k, and r is. H is the x value of your circle, of your center, so h is 0. K is the y value of your center, so k is 6. And then your radius is 2, so r is 2. Plug that into the formula. Remember, in your formula, in your equation, x and y are going to stay as x and y. So we're going to have the x part is going to be x minus h, x minus 0, in parentheses, squared. The y part, and in the first circle, it's always plus in the middle. Plus y minus h. You got y minus h is 6, so y minus 6, that whole thing squared. Equals r squared. r is 2, so 2 squared. Now just to simplify this, just like when you had the center at the origin, x minus 0 is just x. So really this is just x squared. You can write it as x minus 0, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. Y minus 6 squared equals 2 squared, which we'll just write as 4. So that is your equation for a circle with a center of 0, 6 and a radius of 2. Okay. The next example is a little different. The next example gives you the center, but it doesn't give you the radius. So you're going to have to find the radius. There's a couple ways to find the radius. You could use the distance formula, or you could plug it in, use the equation to plug it in. Okay. We're going to use the equation of the circle since it's new to us. But you could also use the distance formula. I'll write down the distance formula off to the side here. So that is the distance formula. X2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared, and then the whole thing you take the square root of. That'll give you the radius. That's the distance from the center to the outer edge of the circle. You could use that formula, but I'm going to use the circle formula. Okay. So we'd start by identifying h and k. H is the x value of the vertex, which is of the center. I keep saying vertex, which is -4. K is the y value, which is 11. Okay. And we don't know r. That's what we need to find. So to find r, we're going to use the point. Okay, because the point is an ordered pair. The point is going to be our x value and our y value. So we could take that equation of a circle, which again is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And we know h, we know k, we know x, and we know a y. So we could solve for r that way. Now again, the circle basically is the distance formula. These all kind of match up. And it's essentially the exact same thing. All right, so our x and our y value, our x value is 5. Our y value, we'll just kind of assemble this with what we know. Our y value is -1. We don't know r. We do know h. H is -4. Now you have to be careful here because h is -4, and the formula has x minus h. So really you're doing x minus -4, which is +4. It's always the opposite. And then k is 11. Y minus k, -1 minus 11. All right, and then simplify this. 5 plus 4 is 9, so you got 9 squared, plus -1 minus 11 is -12 squared, equals r squared. 9 squared is 81, 12 squared is 144, 81 plus 144 is 225. Equals r squared. Okay. Now again, that's r squared. We want r. So that means our radius, our r value, is the square root of 225. Square root of 225 is 15. So that is our radius. But the problem said to write the equation. So we're going to write the equation now, just plugging in the values that we know. We go back to the formula. Now remember, the actual formula needs to have x in there and y in there. We just subbed those in because we weren't writing the formula. We were trying to find the radius. So it's going to be x plus 4. Okay. So it's basically the exact same thing we already wrote except for these bright blue parts. Plus y minus 11 squared equals the radius squared. Now again, the radius is 15, but the radius squared is 225. All right, and then these last two examples are just graphing. So when you're graphing, you're going to have to identify the center, and you're going to have to identify the radius, and then use that to graph. There's H, there's K. So that means our center is H comma K. Again, it's always the opposite of what you see. So you see -4, so our center is at +4. You see -2, our center is at +2. Now for the radius is whatever it equals, but the square root of it. So r squared is 9. Again, the equation always equals r squared, which means the radius is 3. Okay. So we'll graph our center at 4/4 up 2. And then I like just doing the radius from the center. You'd go up 3, down 3, left 3, and right 3. Okay. And then do your best to draw a circle from that. Okay. Now again, I can do it on my computer. You would have to do this by hand. Okay. So that's a circle. That's a circle that this equation represents. Center at 4, 2, radius of 3. Okay. All right, and then this last one. Again, identify the center. The center is always the opposite of what you see. So our center, our center is, we see +1, so our center is at -1. And we see -3, so our center is at +3. Okay. So -1 up 3. Back 1 up 3. That's the center of your circle. What's the radius of your circle? The radius, or we know what r squared is. R squared is 2. Or r squared is 4, which means r is 2. So from the center, you would go up 2, left 2, down 2, and right 2. I did those opposite. Okay. And then again, connect your dots in a circular shape. So that's all it is for circles. You should be able to look at an equation and graph it. You should be able to write an equation if you're given a point and the center. And you should be able to write an equation if you're given the center and a point. Or rather, you should be able to find the radius of that. Okay. And again, that is the formula, and that is the first conic section we are going to do.